Hi guys, this is Miss Henson. Today we're going to look at more factoring. So you remember your snowflake method, where you put a times c on top, b on the bottom, and then ax on the sides. But we're going to take it a step further, and after we get our factors, we're going to solve them. So we're just going to add one little step. So first things first, let's recall. How do you get zeros from the quadratic equation by graphing them in your calculator? So all we're going to do is go to y equals, plug in your equation, minus 6x plus 8, and we want to graph it. So we can see it crosses the x-axis on this one over here and this one over here, so twice. Now you can kind of guess what they are, but your guess may not be right. This may not be 2. It might be 2.4 or 2.1. So we need to make sure we know what it is. One second, my computer's dying. Okay, so we need to go and put in y equals, make this second one 0. That's how we find our solutions, our x-intercepts. They're called zeros because we find them at 0. And so when we graph that, it'll give us a line of the x-axis. Then we're going to hit second trace 5, and we're going to find out where those two lines intersect. So we have 2 points we have to find. So we're going to look for the left one first. We'll try to solve this one. So your calculator might have different directions for this. All you want to do is keep hitting enter until you see the word intersection. So depending on what version of the calculator you have, it's a little different. So sometimes it'll be 2 times, sometimes it'll be 3 times. But just keep hitting enter until you see the word intersection on the bottom. And that'll give you your 0. So our 0 here is x equals 2. Then we'll do the other side. Second trace 5, and we'll scroll to the right. And we'll find that 0. Hit enter however many times you need until the bottom says intersection. And that one, our 0 is at x equals 4. Okay, same thing for b. Plug in your equation. So x squared plus 5x minus 24. And then we want to make sure y2 is 0 so we can find our zeros, our intersection point. And we can see again it crosses twice, once on the left, once on the right. So we're going to hit second trace 5. And I always go left first. You don't have to. I like to make it a pattern so I don't forget which one I did. So scroll to the left until you see your cursor. And then hit enter until you see the word intersection. So this one's going to be at x equals -8. Okay, and then we'll do the second one. So second trace 5 and scroll over until you see it on the right. Here we go. And it doesn't have to be exactly on. As long as you're somewhere over here on the right, it'll get that answer. And that one's x equals -3. Sorry, +3. Correct? Yes, +3. Now we want to factor each of them. So remember, your factor is your snowflake or diamond method, whatever method you call it for factoring. So on top, we're going to put a times c. Remember, a is always going to be with x squared, b is always with x, c is by itself. So this number in front of x squared, this understood 1, that's a. B is with x, c is by itself. So a times c is 8. B for the bottom is -6. and ax on both sides. So 1x. Okay, then we can go back to our calculator to find our factors. How we do that, if you remember 8.2, you take your top number, so that 8, you divide by x, and do the same thing, 8 divided by x, but we're going to add x. Then we look on our graph, or table, and we want to find the bottom number. So we want to find -6 in the right column, all the way over on the right. So -6 over here is twice, and it'll always be there twice. Sometimes you'll see both of them, sometimes you won't. But they're going to give you the same numbers, -4 and -2. This one's just flipped, -2 and -4. But it's the same exact numbers. So -2 and -4. It doesn't matter what order you put them in. And then we just simplify. 1 over -2, we don't need a 1 in front of x, so we can get rid of that. That's just x minus 2. Same thing over here, we don't need a 1 in front of x, so that's just x minus 4. Okay, for b, so your a is always going to be in front of x squared, so that's 1. B is always in front of x. C is always by itself. So a times b on top, a times c on top is 1 times -24. B on the bottom, so 5, and ax on the sides, so 1x. And then we just go back to our calculator. Take your top number, plug it into y equals, so -24 divided by x. Same thing again, -24 divided by x plus x. And we want to find our bottom number in y2. So go to your table, and we're going to look for 5, which is right here. +5 gives us -3 and +8. We will add those to our snowflake. And then we simplify. We don't need a 1 in front of x, so this is just x +8, so +8. And we don't need a 1 in front of this x, so that one's just x minus 3. So now you have your zeros and you have your factors. So compare your solutions, which are your zeros, these up here. Compare these to your factors. Those are your parentheses. What do you notice about them? Right, they're opposites. Up here we had 2 and -2. Then we had 4 and -4.
Third lunch, orange, grab and go. May head to the cafeteria. Third lunch, orange, grab and go.
And then on B, we had -8 and +8, and 3 and -3. So they're going to be opposites. And this is because if you were to solve your parentheses, solve your factors, how do you solve for x? You add 2 to cancel it out. So x equals a +2, which is what we got. Same thing here. If you have x minus 4, you add 4 to cancel it out. So x equals a +4, which is what we got there. So solving your factors is that simple. You're just going to solve your factors for x. And we do that by using the zero product property. Zero product property just means when the product of 2 or more numbers is 0, one of those numbers has to be 0. So product is multiplication. So if we did 2 times 3, we're going to get 6. The only way we're going to get 0 is if one of these two numbers is 0. So if we did 2 times 0 or 3 times 0, something has to be 0 for us to equal 0. So your roots or your zeros of the quadratic function, those are always your x values of your x-intercepts. But for your x-intercept, what's always the y value? What always goes second? 0. That's where you find it on the graph. When you're looking at a parabola, y is 0 on these 2 points because it hasn't gone up or down any from your x-axis. It's just stayed at 0. So your factored form right here becomes equal to 0 because that's where we find x-intercepts. That's why they're called zeros, because they're equal to 0. So how we do this, how we solve by factoring or solve by zero product property, they both solve the same way. They mean the same thing. All you're going to do is factor. So you're going to do your snowflake. Put your a times c on top. So negative 24 on top, 5 on the bottom, and then ax on the sides. So 2x and 2x. And then you go to your calculator to find the bottom numbers, which in this case is negative 3 and 8. Then you simplify. 2x minus 3 doesn't simplify, so that's just 2x minus 3. 2x over 8 simplifies to x over 4. So that's x plus 4. Once you've got them factored, all you're going to do is set it equal to 0 and solve. So we're going to split it up, set the first parenthesis equal to 0, then set the second parenthesis equal to 0. And then we'll solve. So how do we solve this? 2x minus 3. Right, we're going to add 3 to the other side. So then 2x equals 0 plus 3 is 3. Then what do? We divide. Divide out 2. Oh, we got to get rid of there. 1 second. Divide out that 2. And 3 over 2 doesn't simplify. It's just 3 over 2. And then same thing over here. How do we solve for x? We subtract 4. So then 0 minus 4 is negative 4. So that's how we get our answers. We just factor it, set them equal to 0, and solve for x. Okay. So let's try it on B. Now I will say in the last lesson in 8.4, y'all learned you need to factor out a GCF. So I'm going to adjust these steps just a little bit. The first thing you need to do is check for a GCF. We want to take that GCF out. It'll make our answers more manageable, our factors more manageable to work with. So do we have a GCF here? How do we check that? Well, we go to our calculator and we're going to take each one of our numbers and we're going to divide them by x. What's my last one? Negative 90. Okay, then we're going to look at our table. And we want to find the highest number where all of our columns have whole numbers or integers. They can be negative. We want to find the highest column where all of our numbers are integers. So we can scroll down. We can see that negative 2 has all integers. Negative 1 has all integers. Positive 1 has all integers. Positive 2 has all integers. And there's no point to go any further on this one because your lowest number is 2. which means that's the furthest we can go. We can't take out anything bigger than 2. Because if we divide 2 by 3 or 2 by 4 or 2 by 5, we're always going to get a decimal. So the highest we can go is 2. So our highest number on our table that has no decimals is 2. So 2 is our GCF. The rest of these numbers, that's what you're going to get when you factor out 2. Let me see if I can change my screen real quick. No. Nope. One second. There, that's what I wanted. So our GCF was 2. And then when we factor it out, we're going to get the rest of this column. So 1, -4, -45. So then we have 1x squared, -4x, -45. And that comes straight from your calculator. I think that's a little small. Let's go ahead back to the big screen. So 2 is our GCF. 1 goes with x squared, -4 with x, -45 with by itself. Exactly in that order. And then we'll factor with that new quadratic equation without the GCF. So you have A, B, C. So A times C on top, 1 times -45. B on the bottom, and AX on the sides, so 1x. Okay, then we're going to go to y equals, clear everything out, and we want to put our top number divided by x, and then the same thing, divided by x plus x. That's how we're going to find our factors. And we look for the bottom number, -4. So over in the very last column, where do you see -4? Right, in the middle. So we have 5 and -9. Then we simplify. Bring down your GCF. Your first factor, we don't need a 1 in front of x, so just x, +5 plus 5. And our second factor, again, we don't need a 1 in front of x, so x minus 9. So those are our factors. We took our GCF out, and we got our factors from the calculator. To solve this, all we're going to do is set them equal, every single factor, set it equal to 0. So 2 equals 0. Let me change the color so it doesn't blend in. So 2 equals 0. X plus 5 equals 0. X minus 9 equals 0. And we'll solve each one of them. So 2 equals 0, there's nothing to solve there. And does 2 equal 0? Like, is $2 the same thing as $0? No, that doesn't make sense. That is not a solution. So that one we don't worry about. And your GCF you'll never have to worry about. That'll always be false. Then we got x plus 5 equals 0. How do we solve for x? We subtract 5. So 0 minus 5 is -5. Okay, so that's our first one. Then x minus 9 equals 0. How do we solve for x? We add 9. So x equals 0 plus 9 is 9. So those are our two solutions. And you can always check it by graphing. I didn't do it on the first one.
Third lunch, blue dine-in. May head to the cafeteria. Third lunch, blue dine-in.
You can check it by graphing by plugging your equation in. Check your graph. And you can do put in 0, forgot that. And you can do second trace 5. And you can come over here to the left. Oops. And that one gave us -5. So we got that correct. And then we can go to the right. And this one gives us +9. So we got that one correct. So you can always check by graphing it in your calculator. Okay, let's try another one. So we have 112x squared minus 63. So let's check for a GCF. Those will make these way more manageable. So we're going to go to our calculator, go to y equals. To check for a GCF, you're going to take your first number divided by x, take your second number divided by x, and this one doesn't have a third number, so we only have those two. And we want to find the column or the row that has no decimals. You want the highest row with no decimals. And again, you can go back to this. We cannot go above 63. If we go above 63, all of our numbers are going to be decimals. The lowest amount we can take out, or the highest amount we can take out, is 63. So 1 has no decimals. What else? 7 has no decimals. We can keep scrolling. You can scroll all the way down to 63, but I'm going to save you some time because your GCF should never be that big. So this one's going to be 7. And if you want to scroll all the way down to 63, you are more than welcome to. But again, your GCF should never be that big. So our GCF here is 7. These other two numbers in that row, 16 and -9, that's going to be the rest of your equation. In that order, 16 first, then -9. So 16 first, that goes with x squared, and then -9 goes by itself. And that's just dividing out 7. 112 divided by 7 is 16. -63 divided by 7 is -9. Then we can do our factoring. So take your GCF out. We did that. Now we're going to factor. So we can do our snowflake. However, this one actually has a shortcut. If you remember from the last lesson, when you have two numbers but you don't have an x term in the middle, check and see if you know their square root. Do we know the square root of 16? Yes, that's 4. Do we know the square root of 9? Yes, that's 3. So if you know the square root of both and you have no x term, this is called a difference of squares. So you have a shortcut. You're going to make your two factors. You're going to do the square root of 16x squared. That's 4x. Square root of 9 is 3. And we're going to make 1 plus and 1 minus because they're a difference of squares. They have to be different. A +3 times a -3 gives us that -9. They have to be different to get a -9. So that's our shortcut to factoring a difference of squares. Now, if you want to do the snowflake method, you are more than welcome to do that. You do not have to use the shortcut. Okay, so we factored it. Now we're going to set each factor equal to 0. So 7 equals 0. 4x plus 3 equals 0. 4x minus 3 equals 0. And we'll solve each one of them for x. Now 7 equals 0, that doesn't have an x. This one doesn't have a solution. So you don't have to worry about your GCF. 4x minus 3. How do we solve for x? We subtract our 3 over. So 4x equals negative 3. Then we divide our 4. So x equals negative 4. 3 over 4. Okay, then the second one. We add our 3 over because it's negative. Then we divide our 4. So x is 3 over 4. So those are your two solutions. Okay. Perfect. I'm going to do one more with you just to make sure we're okay. So I'm going to do number 10 on your practice. So when you can either go to your practice right now and look at it, or when you get there, you can come back and watch this part of the video. But I'm going to do number 10. So first thing you want to do is check for a GCF. We do that in our calculator. So we take all of our numbers. We have 3x, 3, 15, and 18. So we're going to do 3 divided by x, 15 divided by x, 18 divided by x. And we want to find the highest column with no decimals. Now again, we can't go past our lowest number. Our lowest number is 3. That's the most we can take out. Think of it like this. If you only have $3, say you have $3, your sister has 15, your brother has 18. Can you go see a movie that's $5 if you only have 3? No. So you can't take out more than what you all have. You all have a max of 3. So that's the furthest we can go. So let's look at our numbers. 1 has no decimals. 3 has no decimals. And again, we can't go past that. So 3 is the highest number with no decimals. So 3 is our GCF. The rest of these numbers, that's what you're going to get when you divide out 3. So that 3 divided by 3 gives us 1x squared. That's the first number. Then we should get 5. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Then we should get 6. 18 divided by 3 is 6. So your calculator is going to tell you exactly what to write. 3 for your GCF. The rest of these go in the equation. Now that we've factored out our GCF, we're going to factor. This one does not have a shortcut because we don't know the square root of 6. You have to know the square root of your first and your last to do a shortcut. So, on top, we have a times c. 1 times 6 is 6. On the bottom, 5. And on the sides, ax. So 1x. Then we find our numbers. So we take our top number and divide by x. And when we're factoring, we do that again, but we add x. This is where you add x. Go back to our table, and we want to find the bottom number in the last column. So we see 5, and it gives us 2 and 3, or 3 and 2. It doesn't matter which order you write them. So that gives us our factors. So we have our GCF, then we have x plus 2, because we don't need a 1. Then we have x plus 3. So those are our factors. Now we need to solve. We solve by setting them equal to 0. Okay, again, your GCF will never be anything. There's no x there, so you can't solve that. So don't worry about your GCF. Then x plus 2, we subtract 2, so x equals negative 2. X plus 3, we subtract 3, so x equals negative 3. So GCF, factor it, then solve it by setting it equal to 0. And you can always check it in your calculator. Okay, the last example. Example 2a, sometimes you're going to be given the roots, the x-intercepts, and you need to take it back to the quadratic formula, or quadratic function, the equation. How you're going to do that is you're going to, a lot of times they'll give it to you in one big equation, so x equals negative 4 comma 3. So what you're going to do is separate them up. So x equals negative 4, x equals positive 3. And you want to move the roots back to the x side. You want to get your factors. So this is a negative 4, so how do I move it over? I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to add 4. So that gives me x plus 4. Negative 4 plus 4, that's 0. And then for for 3, we're going to subtract it. So that gives us x minus 3. And then 3 minus 3 is 0. So those are your two equations. To get your big quadratic equation, you're going to make them both factors. So put them in their parentheses, and then we just FOIL them out. So x times x, I'm going to write it down here, is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Combine your like terms. So negative 3x plus 4x gives us that 1x. And just bring everything else down. And then that's your quadratic equation. Okay? And then you can check, do the roots match the x-intercepts? You can check that in your calculator. Your roots, when you do it in your calculator, should be negative 4, 0, and 3, 0, which I put the graph over here for you. They are negative 4, 0, and 3, 0. And do your y-intercepts match the value for c? Our c is negative 12. That should be our y-intercept. So if we follow that down, our y-intercept is at negative 12. So you can graph it to double check. Okay, when you have a fraction, you can't just add or subtract that over. We don't do fractions and factors. So how we get rid of that, we're going to start the same, split it up into two equations. Let's work with this one. So to get rid of a fraction is just division. To get rid of that, we do the opposite. We multiply. We multiply out the denominator. So multiply that to the other side. So 4 times x is 4x. And then we still have 1. How do we move 1 over here? Well, it's a positive 1, so we're going to subtract it. So 4x minus 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So if you have a fraction, you have to multiply the bottom over before you add or subtract. If you just have a number, you want to add or subtract it over. So this is minus 1, so we do the opposite, plus 1. So x plus 1, negative 1 plus 1, that's just 0. So these are going to be your factors. We'll set it up in one equation. Plus 1. And then you can do distributive property, so FOIL, or you can do the generic rectangle that we learned last semester. I'm going to go with FOIL. So 4x times 4x is 4x squared. 4x times 1 is 4x. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Combine your like terms. So 4x squared, 4 minus 1 is 3x, and bring down your minus 1. So split them up into two equations and get everything back with x. If it's a fraction, multiply it and then add or subtract. If it's just an integer, add or subtract it over. And put them together in FOIL or do generic rectangle. Either one. And you'll get your quadratic equation back. Okay, go try your practice. Perfect.